Good morning from a finally sunny day. It's been raining like crazy for ages. So, for survival, we were talking about making something suitable for civilians. And where do you get your info from? So, what I did is I went around those peoples and cultures who do survival as part of their daily living. The first place I looked were with the Bushmen of South Africa, who even till today live in the Kalahari Desert and very much do survival type stuff on a daily basis. I then took it further and looked at the varying Eskimo tribes in the colder climates, and using historical reports looked at Native American and South American things. And interestingly enough, it turned out that regardless of status or place in society or who they were, across the board there were three items that every single person carries. And this to me forms what I would call the primary survival kit. The things that they would have for literally everyday living. And it was very small, very portable, and it was the basic equipment carried in addition to whatever they would carry for what they did. So hunters would carry additional hunting equipment. Any bushcraft type stuff would be added to this. This was the absolute basics, and it forms three items for the primary personal level. Then there are other items which would fit in for what I would call the personal survival, which would vary by place and by who they were. And then the geographical survival, which depended very much on where in the world they lived, what kind of environment. So for the Eskimo tribes, for example, whether the Inuit or whatever, they would obviously have a certain amount of gear that falls under what we can call shelter, because obviously in cold environments that's very important, which the Bushmen never had. The Bushmen, of course, would have a lot more to do with water and getting water because of where they live, and so on and so forth. But we have three primary items, and we will go through each one, and we will talk about each thing in itself and what I have chosen as mine and why. But as I say, we're talking things that are very small, very easy to carry, and it does fit in many ways to the absolute basic imperative items that I think all people with any kind of survival training or experience would choose as, yeah, you got to have those. If you don't have them, you're really in a lot of trouble. And what's very interesting is they also cover certain problems that I've discovered with survival in general. One being that you just won't have the time in a real survival situation to make these. You can, if you're very skilled, make primitive versions of these things, but it will take time even if you have the skill. And if you don't have the skill, it's really, really hard. But they massively improve your ability to survive and to do things in a survival situation. So the three items are a blade, a flame, and a cord. Now each item will vary in accordance with culture and the kind of environment in which they're working. So for example, the Eskimo tribes tend to go with something like an ulu for the blade, which fits to their lifestyle. But every survival type civilian people will have a small knife, which is carried on, is often referred to as a personal knife. It's carried all the time, male, female, whatever, it doesn't matter, they will have one. Any other gear will be in addition. So you will find that if somebody is a hunter or a warrior, they will have other bigger blades and similar, but in addition to the basics. So we're talking basic survival at this stage. So a blade, a flame, and a cord. And I use the more general terms like a flame simply because it does vary, and yeah, you can choose in accordance with what suits you, because in the modern age, of course, we have a lot of options, but always there is some means of creating a fire. Cordage is absolutely critical, and thin, strong, light cordage. It doesn't weigh much. It doesn't take up a lot of space. You obviously, if you're going out, will have additional, dependent on where you are, dependent on where you live, dependent on who you are. But they have a basic which they carry regardless. So the blade, the flame, the cord. On the personal level, usually what you will find, it will be one or two very small items. So medical really falls into that. There's usually some kind of way to bandage up a critical wound. This is not a full medical kit. I'm not saying don't carry a medical kit. Obviously you should, but that would be additional gear. Whereas they've got something that if you've got a bleed that you need to stop, they have a means, be it pressure bandage, a tourniquet, something in that line. So that's on the personal level. Also on this, I would add specifically personal. So for example, I'm diabetic. I have to take medication for it. For me, it would be very important to have a few extra of my medication available, simply to cover my personal needs. Cordage is generally very, very small and thin on this level, but there will be some. And looking at what was carried and what works and the general needs from just people's experience and my own, I carry a pressure bandage because it's what I was trained with. It works on multiple different kinds of injury. Not to say that I wouldn't have other items at a higher level. The geographical gear is area dependent. So shelter items, if you're in a very cold environment, because you need it. I come from Africa where it's very hot. For me, water is the most critical. So a means to carry and a means to purify, because pretty much, and I think anybody in Africa will agree with me, 99% of any water that you find, if any, and it will be rare, which means you've got to get what you can get, will probably be contaminated. So you need a means to clean it. Now, yes, boiling or whatever, your stainless steel cups, but that's a higher level gear. We're talking about on body in an absolute survival situation. And really and truly at this level, I would say your only choice is going to be some kind of tablet purification, simply because I can carry enough to purify 10 liters in such a small profile that it's silly not to. Again, as I say, additional gear, especially if I'm choosing to go out in other level of kits, absolutely, and I will talk about that later, but at this level, I can say that my basic survival gear, blade, flame, cord, my personal meds, pressure bandage, water purification tablets, and literally some kind of very easily folded up and put away plastic bag to carry at least a liter of water. And you can get such tiny items that you could fit this gear easily in a pocket. It won't stand out or be noticed. It is completely legal and you're away. Now, choosing what kind of specific items is now going to be the idea to look at for the next levels.